Right, let's continue the React stuff. I'm listening to music, but I muted because, yeah, I don't wanna. Maybe I should increase the volume, but I don't know. First, create method called handle change that it has a parameter called event. So I assume it's here. Maybe it is here. When the method is called, it receives an event object that contains a string of text from the input element. You can access the string. I forgot to put the timer. It receives an event object that contains a string of text from the input element. So from here, you can access this string with event.target.value inside the method. Update the input property of the component's state with this new string. In the render method, create the input element above the h4 tag. Add the value attribute which is equal to the input property of the component's state. Then add onChange event handler set to the handler change method. When you type in the input box, that text is processed by the handler change method, set as the input property in the local state. And rendered as the value in the input box on the page. The component state is the single source of truth regarding the input data. Single source. Last but not least, don't forget to add the necessary bindings in the constructor. So I think the binding is probably to the handler change method, but I'm not sure. Then here I have handler change. Put an event here. Here I need to put something. Have my complex interactions with React. This input become part of the application state, so React controls the value of that input field. React components, input field. Code editor has the skeleton of a component called control input to create a controlled input. The component state is already initialized with an input property that holds an empty string. This value represents the text a user types into the input field. First, create a method called handler change that has a parameter called event. When the method is called, it receives an event object that contains a string of text from the input elements. You can access the string with event target value inside the method. But I think I remember doing some stuff similar to this, but I wasn't using React. I was using jQuery. You can see its properties here somewhere. Properties. Yeah, I think it's here. So when you pass the mouse or when you click somewhere, you change these properties and you can have X and Y coordinates. Let's see if I click. But I forgot where Maybe it's inside each div. Yeah, whatever. We'll look at into it later. So I need to pass event dot target dot value. So probably should do the set state stuff. Well, now it's saturated a little bit. This is broken. Just gonna reload the page. It's not typing anything. And there we go. So I need to put handle change event. This dot set state. Now I'm not sure if I should probably just do like this. Then input event dot targets dot value. I think this makes sense. And now to do something here. The render method create the input element above the h4 tag. So I should probably put input. Add a value attribute. So I should probably put on click here equals to this dot handle change. So build error. So obviously I'm doing something wrong here. In the render method, create the input element above the h4 tag. Add a value attribute which is equal to the input property of the component's state. Add a value attribute which is equal to the input property of the component's state. So I have to create the input and then add a value inside of the input, I guess. Something like this. Is equal to the property of the component's state. Oh, I need to pass here. Pass value here. Because this is gonna take an argument. But it doesn't make sense. Well, actually, it does make sense. So if I'm understanding this, what they want me to do is whenever someone types, it's gonna update this state. So the handle change has to do that. If I put handle state here, handle change doesn't work. It has to be this dot handle state, handle change. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Update the input property of the component state with this new string. I think I'm gonna put Maybe I'll increase the sound a little bit here. First, create a method called change that has a parameter called event. Just the value stuff that I'm not sure. Great. It's failing everything. I knew it would fail, just was curious to see which one would fail. And it's failing because it's not showing up here. First, create a method called change it as a parameter called event. Oh, I think it's the last part. It's right exactly I need to do that. The render method create the input element above the h4 tag. Add a value attribute is equal to the input property of the component's state. Then add the non-change event handler such the it's on change, not on click. Yeah, it makes sense because it's not a button, it's an input. And there's such the handle change method. But that's what I'm doing. So what is going on here? I'm gonna do it like this so it's easier to read. So I have the value here, I'm passing the value. If I just do it like this, it works, but maybe I need to do it outside the input, but the problem is clearly this. And I don't understand why. I think I'm just gonna look at the hint. Yeah, I won't change this and I'll change. So I got it right. Maybe it's the order. I don't see what's wrong here. Maybe I'm passing the value and it shouldn't be. Oh, so doesn't have any arguments. Oh, that's why. So maybe because I put value here, it already has the value of the state when I type, and then the handle change doesn't need to pass anything. Yeah, now it works. Finally creating I think I'm gonna change this music. Just something is easier to concentrate. Create an h1 tag after the form, which renders the submit value from the component's state. Engine tag after the form. So it's probably here. Which renders the submit value from the component's state. So submit. So it should be this dot submit. This dot state dot submit. You can then type in the form and click the button or press enter, and you should see your input rendered to the page. Maybe it's the other way. This goes in the bottom. In my form component set up with an empty form with a submit handler. Submit handler will be called when the form is submitted. We've added a button which submits the form. You see it has the type set to submit, indicating it's the button controlling the form. So it's this one here. Add the input element in the form and sets value to onChange. This dots handle submit. So I probably have to do something here, which I guess is to change the submit. This dot set state submit equals events dot targets. I assume it's gonna be this, and then here, not sure. After the form, so this should be here. No, so when I click, it's not working. Oh, but maybe it is working because this is supposed to change the state of the submit. Let's see. So typing should update submit. So these are passing. Oh, it's handle. Probably here handle change. But now it doesn't look like it's working. Add the input element to the form and set its value and don't change attributes like the last challenge. Add the input element in the form. So I have to set its value. State, not input. So now I think this portion is probably correct. Shouldn't I put it inside the submit button? Should then complete the handle submit method so that it sets the component state property submit to the current input value in the local state. So here, then complete the handle submit method so that it sets the component state property submit to the current value in the local state. So here should be input, not value. But I'm not sure that's the case. Note, you also must call events.prevent default in the submit handler. So what is the submit handler here? To prevent the default from form, to prevent the default form submit behavior, you will refresh the web page. For camper convenience, the default behavior has been disabled here to prevent refreshes from resetting challenge code. Finally, create an h1 tag after the form which renders the submit. Value from the component's state. You then type in the form and click the button press, and you should see your input rendered to the page. So here is on change. I think this part has to be correct. The bindings are here. So that should be the submit part. The thing that I'm not understanding is they didn't tell me anything about the button here. So how can I connect this H1 to the button? Doesn't make sense. Set up with an empty form, submit handler. Submit handler will be called when the form is submitted. Maybe, oh, send or submit here. Should call. So that's the component state property. Submit the current input value in the local state. Also must call event.prevent found in the submit handler. Finally, creates an h1 tag after the form which renders the submit value. The component state. The last part I don't understand. Maybe I have to change something here. Go back to value again, but now this is dot state. And if I just put equals to the input, I can make it like this. Then here I can put state. It's gonna be state. But then how I connect the input to the state? So input submit like this. So this is the state that is being passed here. Input. Doesn't work. I have no idea. I think I'm gonna look at the solution. I think this way it made more sense. State input. Oh, so is this a state of submit, not handle submit. Yeah, what isn't clear is this connection here. Oh, I didn't see this. I didn't focus on this part here, but it's still not working. So probably made another mistake. Input value this state input. Exactly what I did. I won't change it because this and no change. Same thing I did. So it must be here. No, it seems to be the same thing. I'm probably missing something minor. Well, it's probably the same thing from the previous one. That I have to put something here. No. I think it's correct. Oh, it's this here. So this target input. No, it should work. Doesn't work. This state input. Yeah, now finally. Yeah, because I have to change the state, the input property here. So event target value. This pattern illustrates some important paradigms in React. The first is unidirectional data. So a lot of examples that pass props to child JSX elements and child React components in previous challenges. Maybe wonder where those props come from. A common pattern is to have a stateful component containing the state important to your app, then that then renders child components. One of these components should have access to some pieces of that state, which are passed in as props. For example, maybe you have an app component that renders a navbar, among other components. In your app, you have state that contains a lot of user information, but the navbar only needs access to the user's name, to the user's username, so it can display it. Pass a piece of state to the navbar component as a prop. So not even sure if I fully got what they're saying here. In your app, you have state that contains a lot of user information, but the navbar only needs access to user's username, so it can display it. Pass a piece of state to the navbar component as a prop. This pattern illustrates an important paradigm in React. The first is unidirectional data flow. State flows in one direction down the tree of your application components from the stateful parent component to child components. Child component only receives the state that data they need. The second is that complex stateful apps can be broken down into just a few or maybe a single stateful component. The rest of your components simply receive state from the parents as props, from the parent as props, and render a UI from that state. It begins to create a separation where state management is handled in one part of code and UI rendering is another. This principle of separating state logic from UI logic is one of React's key principles. When it's used correctly, it makes the design of complex stateful applications much easier to manage. The my app component is stateful, and when there's a navbar component as child. Pass name property in its state out to the child component. And then there's navbar. Pass the name property in its state down to the child component. Yeah. So maybe it's just like this. Huh. So I should probably give a name to this. And this is gonna pass to the navbar, if I understand this correctly. It's name parp. Then show the name in the H1 is name. So it should show up camperbot there. So maybe state, but doesn't make sense because I'm passing as name here. So why doesn't name only works? Don't understand this. These props, I think. Yeah, I don't get it. Or maybe because it's on a state. So, yeah, I don't like the way that this is explained here. It just doesn't make sense to me. When I'm making name equals state name and passing here, this means that I'm attaching this variable to the state here. But then why do I use props here to connect this? Maybe it's because of super. And this class inherits from this one. Oh, but this super is supposed to be to the component parent class, not to the MyApp class. Because MyApp is only rendering this class, but this class doesn't inherit from MyApp. So I guess props is not really clear to me. From what I think right now, it's supposed to be a keyword that allows you to inherit from parent classes the properties of the parent class, which is the React component class. So if it's this.props.name, I don't understand how it works. But I guess I'll just move on and research that later. There are three components outlined in the code editor. The MyApp component is the parent that will render the get input and render input child components. Add the get input component to the render method in MyApp. Then pass it a prop called input. So here I should probably use props again. Assign to input value from maps state. Oh, this is probably this state input value. Also create a pop called handle change. Oh. And pass the input handler to handle change to it. Next, add the render. Then create a prop called input and pass the input value from state to it. So same thing. Once you're finished, you'll be able to type in the input field in the getInput component, which then calls the render method in its parent via props. This updates the input in the state of the parent, which is passed as props to both children. Observe how the data flows between the components and how the single source of truth remains the state of the parent component. Admittedly, this example is a bit contrived. We should serve to illustrate how data callbacks can be passed between React components. Nice. So maybe it's just difficult to explain this component, these props. I think the hardest part of programming, so far from my experience, is probably this. It's understanding these things that are context dependent and that they are passed around from functions or methods. So yeah, it's probably just hard to understand. Because it's difficult when you're analyzing uh, scripts or functions or the things like that. Everything else you can see visually what's going on, but these portions where you have things that are carried through the context and you don't necessarily see that where they are changing or how they are flowing, let's say, to the program, then it becomes really hard to understand what's going on because you can follow the execution. React components have several special methods that provide opportunities to perform actions at specific points in the lifecycle of a component. These are called lifecycle methods or lifecycle hooks, and allow you to catch components at a certain points in time. This can be before they render, before they update, before they receive props, before they mount, so on. Here's a list of some of the main lifecycle methods. Component will mount, component did mount, should component update, component did update, component will unmount. Next several, let's cover some of the basic use cases for these lifecycle methods. The component will mount lifecycle method will be deprecated in the future. The component will mount method is called before the render method when a component is being mounted to the DOM. Log something to the console with component will mount. The best practice with React is to place API calls or any calls to your server in the lifecycle method component in mount. So it's here. This method is called after a component is mounted to the DOM. Any calls to set state here will trigger a re-rendering of your component. When you call an API in this method and set your state with the data that the API returns, it will automatically trigger an update once you receive the data. There's a mock API call in component mount. It sets state after 2.5 seconds to simulate calling a server to retrieve data. This example requests the current total active users for our site. The render method render the value of active users in the H1. Attach an event listener in the component mount method for key down events and have this event trigger the callback and the creep pass. Attach an event listener in the component mount. So I can see that the function is here. So let me read this. We have been using some of the synthetic event handlers such as onClick. React syntax event system is great to use for most interactions to manage on DOM elements. However, if you want to attach an event handler to the document or window objects, have to do this directly. Attach an event listener method for key down events and have these events trigger the callback and the key press. So I don't know if that's what they want me to do. Doesn't make sense. Maybe this, not under key press. Use document.add event listener. Okay. Oh no, I think I need to put a passive function after. Which takes the event in quotes as the first argument and the callback as the second argument. But it didn't say how to specify that. Key press, maybe. Then the component will now remove this same event listener and pass the same arguments through this. Isn't handle enter here and then oh no, this is calling this. So when you press enter, the key code for enter is 13 is gonna activate this, which is says this, but it's good practice to use this lifecycle. I don't know what the thing in quotes is that I need to put here. Key down. Oh, it has to be these also. Sure forgot. Nice. The should component update method is added in a component called only events. Currently, this method returns true, so only events re-renders every time it receives new prompts. Modify the method so only events updates only if the value of its new props is even. I always forget what is even and what is odd. Which one are which in English? Also, okay. So I need to update this. So if next props remainder true. So only if it updates only if the value of its new props is even. Click the add button and watch the order of events in your browser's consoles as the lifecycle hooks are triggered. So it's not working. So do I have to use both? No. It's not working as well. So how do I clean this? Okay. Yeah, should be. So when I click the button, it's gonna activate this. Just this dot add value. Set state value. Oh, so maybe I should make the set state here as well. This dot state dot value. This dot state. It's 5. If any component receives new state or new props, it re-renders itself and all its children. This is usually okay, but Reactive provides a lifecycle method and call when the child component receives new state or props. Declare specifically if the components should update or not. The method is should component update, and it takes next props and next state as parameters. This method is a useful way to optimize performance. I think I'm gonna research what is props, because this is still very confusing. This method is should component update, and it takes next props and as next state as parameters. This method is a useful way to optimize performance. For example, the default behavior is that your component re-renders receives new props, even if the props haven't changed. You can use should component update to prevent this by comparing the props. The method must return a boolean value that tells React whether or not to update the component. Compare the current props, these props to the next props to determine if you need to update or not, and return true or false. You compare the current props, these dot props, to the next props. It's just confusing. I don't understand what they want me to do, neither what these are here. What's the difference between these ones are and these dot props? So to me, it seems like these dot props is the previous one, and next props is supposed to be the next one, but because you could put any name here, it doesn't have to be next props. Or I get that they are doing for illustration purposes, but I don't understand the logic behind it. So the return here should be true, and if I do this, it's not gonna work. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna look at the solution. Yeah, I just don't like the way that they explain this stuff. Rather watch YouTube videos and figure out later. If then statement, check whether the value of the next prop is even. Next prop is not value. The feeling I have is that they do sometimes, I'm not sure if I'm just projecting, but that they make this stuff like not very well explained, so it's harder to solve it. That's the sensation I have, which pisses me off. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick. But who knows? Maybe it's just hard to explain, or maybe I'm not understanding really well. But because I think the most important part of this is understanding the execution there. What is props, how it's changing, and the context of the this and the props. And I think it's just hard to get it because, yeah, I'm not sure. It's hard to visualize. Let me see how many of these to finish. I don't know, hopefully after I finish this and I'm able to make the site to see the methods of all the languages, then I can create some traceback stuff for JavaScript as well, and then I can build React things and watch the execution. I'll look it up how to track the state of the this keywords and the props. Then I can build a script that uses both and see how they travel across time. I think having something like this will be much better to understand what's going on. But I'm not sure if it's gonna be hard to do. The stack frame is easier, but then I'm not sure to capture the state of this keyword is probably more complex because you have to be aware of execution context and local and global variables in memory, so it might be a lot harder. So I'm on the introducing inline style here. 12 left. I still have plenty of time. There are other complex concepts that add powerful capabilities to your React code, but you may be wondering about the more simple problems of how to style those JSX elements you're creating in React. You'll likely know that it won't be exactly the same as working with HTML because of the way you apply classes to the JSX elements. If you import styles from a style sheet, it isn't much different at all. You apply a class to your JSX element using the class name attribute and apply styles to the class in your style sheet. Another option is to apply inline styles, which are very common in React. So div style equals color. So it's kind of like a dictionary, but in strings. JSX is the style attribute, but because of the way JSX is transpiled, you can set the value to a string. You can't set the value to a string. Instead, set it equal to a JavaScript object. Here's an example. Yeah. That's how we can case the font size property. This is because React will not accept keyback case keys in the style object. React will apply the correct property name for us in the HTML. Add a style attribute to the div in the code editor to give the text a color of red. So and that size, I think it's here. So I did something wrong here. I'm kind of confused from this one. But it's obviously common because it's an object. And here should be such. You may have noticed in the last challenge that there were several other syntax differences from HTML inline styles in addition to the style attribute set to a JavaScript object. First, the names of certain CSS style properties use camel case. For example, the last challenge set the size of the font with font size instead of font size. Our property value length units like height, width, and font size are assumed to be in pixel unless otherwise specified. Quotes. Okay. If you have a large set of styles, you can assign a style object to a constant to keep your code organized. Declare your style constant as a global variable. Constant. Declare your styles constant as a global variable in the top at the top of the file. Oh, so I need to change above this line. Initialize styles constant and assign an object. Give three style properties and their values to it. Give the div a color of purple. So I'm gonna const color purple. I think that's what they want me to do. Font size 40. And a border of 2 pixels solid purple. It's working here, but then set the style attribute equal to the styles constant. Also, maybe I need to make const equals this. Oh, that's it. I don't understand exactly what they want me to do. Oh, it has to be curly braces. I'm just gonna look at the solution. Styles. There we go. The code provided the render method has an array that contains 20 phrases to represent the answer found in the classic. It is magic 8-ball toy. Button click event is bound to the ask method. So I have a bunch of code in this one. So button click on click this dot ask. Sends the index, so it's gonna choose randomly from one of these. Button click event is bound to the ask method. So each time the button is clicked, a random number will be generated and stored as the random index in state. On line 52, delete this string change me. And reassign the answer cons so your code randomly accesses a different index of the possible answers. So it's gonna be, so this has to be equal to the ask state. I think maybe it's this dot state dot ask. This dot state dot ask. So your code randomly accesses a different index of the possible arrays, possible answers array each time the component updates. Finally, insert the answer const inside the p tags. Probably this dot answer. Ooh, maybe it's this here. Doesn't work. So maybe did this, and now it's highlighting this. Thanks for the follow. Don't know. Cyborg Cyborg Mario CTV. So I have to think about how the possible answers is connected there. So as this states user input is gonna change the index and handle change is gonna change the value of the input, which is on the state here. So it has to be this line that is off, but this dot state dot ask. Oh, maybe it's user input. To provide the render method has an array that contains many phrases. When you click, event is bound to the ask method. So each time the button is clicked, a random number will be generated and stored as the random index in state. So here. But I can't. Why is this a string? I don't understand. Reassign the answer cone so your code randomly accesses a different index of the possible answers array each time the component updates. So maybe it's possible answers because it's not involved anywhere here. But it's still not printing anything there. So this state random index, probably. So the ask, and I don't know how to access the ask because it's just changing the state. So maybe it's like this. Yeah, nice. My component contains a boolean in its state which tracks whether you want to display some element in the UI or not. So toggle display, click, binds to this, and this one is simpler than, or seems to be simpler than the other one. So when you click, it changes to false, or to the opposite of the state. The button toggles the state of this value. Currently, it renders the same UI every time. Rewrite the render methods with an if else statement so that if display is true, return the current markup. Otherwise, return the markup without h1 element. Oh, I remember this one being confusing. So if it's false, so if the state is false, I should display this. Tisu boy Suboy, thanks for the follow. I don't know why I'm not receiving. Or maybe it's because I'm using a different red phone. But should be giving me a sound and it's not giving. So I think what I should do is I need to make an if statement with the set there, with the state dot display equals true. Then I render this. So this. And then if it's false, but I'm not sure if this is the best approach to this. Otherwise, return the markup without the h1 element. So it should be working. Render method should use an if else statement. So it's probably else here. It's done. There we go. But I'm gonna look at the solution and see there's a better way that doesn't rewrite everything. No, they did the same way. Oh yeah, and then don't need to put equals true there. It's a habit that I have to drop. Because when you make this statement, it's already true. And if the statement is false, it doesn't pass. So it's not necessary to put equals true there. If the condition is true, the markup will be returned. If the condition is false, the operation will immediately return false. So I need to change here. I remember this one being confusing as well. So maybe I'll read everything. The if else statement worked in the last challenge, but there's a more concise way to achieve the same result. Imagine that you are tracking several conditions in a component and you want different elements to render depending on which of these conditions. If you write a lot of else if statements to return slightly different UIs, you may repeat code which leaves room for error. Instead, you can use the AND logical operator to perform conditional logic in a more concise way. This is possible because you want to check if a condition is true, and if it is, return some markup. Here's an example. If the condition is true, the markup will be returned. If the condition is false, the operation will immediately return false after evaluating the condition and return nothing. You can include these statements directly in your JSX and string multiple conditions together by writing AND after each one. This allows you to handle more complex conditional logic in your render method without repeating a lot of code. So I think, but now I'm not sure if I should wrap everything around and then just use the end here in the middle. Yeah, I have just to get the display there as well. Also, it's probably here that I have to do something. Oh, maybe it's like this. And This not state, not. Yeah, but this doesn't feel like. Because then I would have to put, if I want to put a variable here inside, doesn't work. So maybe if I do this, but then, yeah. You can include these statements directly in your JSX with conditions. This allows you to end complex conditional logic in your render method without repeating a lot of code. Solve the previous example again, so the H1 when it renders displays true, but use the analogical operator instead of an if else. Yeah, it's just not clear where should I put this. Because it has to be. So here's saying the way that I did before, but it doesn't work. If I put it like this, it also doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I want to put the other variables there later on. It doesn't make sense. Well, now it's working. So the condition comes first. But what if I want to put a variable here? Or if I want to put name equals something. I don't know. Yeah, but that's how it's supposed to be, so I think I'm gonna look at the solution and see if they did it in a different way. No, they did it the same way. So maybe that's how it works. The code editor has three constants defined within the check user age components. When they're method, they are called button1, button2. So now it's ternary operator, which is also confusing for me. Each of these is assigned a simple JSX expression representing a button element. First, initialize the state of check user age with input and user age both such values of an empty string. First, initialize the state of check user age. So this dot state, I think is like this. No, I'm not sure. Or maybe use parentheses here. But then doesn't make sense. So it's probably both. Yeah, it's probably like this. Because it's gonna be a dictionary, so it has to be curly braces there. With input and user age. You'll set true values of an empty string. So I think this is correct. Once the component is rendering information to the page, users should have a way to interact with it. In the component's return statement, set up a ternary expression that implements the following logic. So now, so I think it's gonna be button one, then expression, something to do, true, then the other entry. Oh, and I have to put this inside of curly braces because it's the HTML part here. So to specify, I have to put in curly braces. But I'm all, not sure. Yeah, because this is already inside, so I don't need to put it twice. Once the component is rendering information to the page, when the page first loads, render the submit button 1 to the page. When the page first loads, render the submit button 1 to the page. Then, when a user enters their age and clicks the button, render a different button based on the age. If a user enters a number less than 18, render button 3. If a user enters a number greater than or equal to 18, render button 2. But now, how I'm gonna display this button 1? So I think I need to get, yeah, inputs and user age, but if this state user age greater than 18, should I use return here? Doesn't work. If state age less than 18, then or maybe I should do it just like this. Yeah, but now it's not working. Oh, because, yeah, doesn't make sense. I'm doing both things in the same. The purpose of the ternary is so we don't use the if else. So this is already the condition. But then how do I specify that I want button true? The condition is true. And it should be loading there. Users enters a number greater than or equal to 18, render button true. Or greater than or equal. So it's the other way around. Initialize states of check user age with input and user age both such values of an empty string. So that part I think is correct. Just the state. Well, how do I display this? I think I'm gonna look. Because I have no idea how to display that to the screen. Oh, this state dot user age. Yeah, so until the on change part is the same, which is from the challenge. This state dot user age. And it is everything inside a clear brace. Also have to do I think I get it now. So if it's equal to an empty string, then you display button one. Then yeah, but then I don't think it writes this 3 times. No, it actually does. Uh, Go to uh, button true. Now it's button 3. But I'm probably doing something wrong here because it's not showing up there. And I put this here. So if it's equal to empty string, show up button one. Maybe here is not the else. It's just the question mark again. It seems to be correct there. So what's wrong with this? Am I missing something? I think when I finish this stuff, I'm gonna set up the virtual machine and start working on the Scrapey. That's what's going on in my mind right now. if that shit doesn't break again. So maybe I should just copy this and yeah. Oh, it's probably missing something. I missed the curly brace at the end there. So it still doesn't show up here. So, oh, maybe it's here the problem. Oh, this state is your age input. Or is the other way around? Maybe. But it shouldn't make any difference. Shouldn't have any difference. If I put one on top of the other, doesn't matter. Shouldn't matter. Maybe it does. So I don't understand what's going on here. Maybe I'm missing something up there, but it only says should change here. So it should be working. Maybe if I reload the page, and then I'll have to submit to change this again, the state here. Oh, maybe it's the way that I've written this state. Could be that. Yeah, so I can't put inside the parentheses. And that should be equal. That's the problem. Yeah, now, there we go. So those parts are always confusing to me. Both these and the React component, when I choose this and when I choose the React DOM render stuff. And the props thing. So I have to remember that states is equal to the object, and I want to understand why, that's the thing. So maybe I should be writing this stuff down. Yeah, I think this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna set up the virtual machine after the string. I'm gonna set up the virtual machine, and then I'm gonna look these things up inside the virtual machine. So, but how can I search for this? How props works? State React. Because I don't want to know what the state is. I think I get it. I want to know y is equal to an object here, and y is parentheses and the object here. So maybe I need to understand better variable declaration and function declaration. I think maybe the difference here is that state is supposed to be a variable and set state a function. But if it is a function, then it doesn't make sense because you don't have you're just passing the argument here inside of this parentheses. So maybe I'll just put state and set state. Then I'll figure out how to search this later. Yeah, I'll search this initially, then after I build all this stuff that I want to build, then I'm gonna explore this stuff using the trace and the other two that I built. Just see the difference between Python and JavaScript. I think that's gonna be better. So let me see how many I have left here. I'm gonna finish this portion today. Render conditionally from props. So it should be at the end here. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's see how much time. So I think I'm gonna scratch this time here, and I'm just gonna finish this portion. I hate these long explanations. First, you need a simple expression that randomly returns a different value every time it is run. In this method random, this method returns a value between 0 and 1 each time it is called. So for 50-50, your expression statistically. Now I have an expression that can make randomized decisions. Okay, so far you've seen how to use merge to make conditions, combine both. Using props to conditionally render code is very common with React developers. They use the value of a given prop to automatically make decisions about what to render. This challenge, you set up a child component to make rendering decisions based on prompts. You also use the ternary operator, but you can see how several of the other concepts that were covered in the last few challenges might be just as useful in this context. The code editor has two components that are partially defined for you, a parent called game of chains and a child called results. Game of chains, results. They are used to create a simple game where the user presses a button to see if they win or lose. So I have to complete this statement here and change this line. First, you need a simple expression that randomly returns a different value every time it is run. You can use math.random. So I guess this part's gonna be equal to this. Statistically speaking, this is a special return. Okay. Now we have an expression that you can use to make a randomized decision in the code. Next, next you need to implement this. Yes, I'm learning. But this is the third time I'm doing this. Takes a while to learn. Next, you need to implement this. Render the results component as a child of game of chains. So I need to make this. The results component. So and pass in an expression as a props called 50-50. So this should be 50-50 equals to expression. I'm not sure if I should put this here, but probably not because it's a variable. Yeah, and stop highlighting. So maybe it's just the expression. In the results component, write a ternary expression to render the h1 element with the text u in. So in the results component, write a ternary expression to render the h1 element. So where is... Oh, I have to build it, maybe. Or you lose based on the 50-50 props that's being passed in from game of chance. Oh, so it's here. H1. So this is gonna take the expression. So I need to make a ternary here. So if this dots, if props dot expression maybe, because I have to pick up this expression from here, and then you win. Oh, but then how I'm gonna write that? That's the problem. Because it's inside of the curly braces. Write a ternary expression to render the h1 element with the text you win. So maybe I have to change outside of the h1. Because this doesn't work. Yeah, so it has to be the other way around. I think it's if it's inside of the h1 is gonna make it as a text, but no. Oh, so maybe it doesn't, because this is not at the part of the HTML. Oh, it is actually. So maybe I can do it like this. This. Oh, but now it doesn't. Well, if I put outside here, it's not gonna work. Oh, it does? No, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter because the question mark is outside of the curly braces, so it takes it as literal. Just doesn't make sense to me. Which was the problem I had on the previous challenge, because... But I was thinking the other way, if I want to pass variables. Yeah, I don't understand. Oh, so I think also I should access through 50-50 and not expression when I'm making the condition here. So the only thing I don't understand is how to put where to put the curly braces to get the if-else statement. Maybe it's outside of this. But either way, I'm gonna have to wrap everything around. So maybe just use strings to be. Let's say hi. So if I have, I'm not sure if it's gonna be 50-50 as well, or yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah, I'm just gonna look. Or maybe it's the other way around as well. The expression equals to, no, 50 equals expression. So this part is correct. But then up here, oh, it's on strings and it's inside H1. So this is not 50-50. Then 0.5 U, then else U plus turn object. So it's still not working. So maybe here is the expression. Let me put it like this. Doesn't work. If I do expression, also doesn't make sense. I think it has to be 50-50. These props 50-50. It's still not working. I forgot the thing here as well. So what else here? Maybe it's just this, and also I did something wrong. Oh, it needs to be ternary here. Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. I didn't even pay attention to that. Now it should work. We're still turning object to object. So it has to be on the, oh, it's just expression, not this other expression. It's still not working. Maybe I have to erase the this there. On this props 50. It's probably something minor that I'm not paying attention to. These are props 50. You win, you lose. Don't get it. Don't get it. So why I'm getting an object when I click? So handle click, set states, counter previous state. It's changing the state of the counter. Oh, maybe no results. 50-50. Doesn't make any sense. Now it's changing there, but it's still not counting correctly. But maybe it's because I have to put it like this. Oh, here. Huh. Well, oh, I didn't know that I had to change there. Hmm. Yeah, it's also written here. I'm just blind. I knew obviously there's something wrong with the button, but for some reason I thought I wasn't supposed to change this. I think it was because it was the same as here. It was probably from the problem. This paradigm is important. The code editor has a simple control input component with a styled border. When to style the border red if the user types more than 15 characters of text. Add a condition to check for this, and if the condition is valid, set the input border style to 3 pixels solid red. So I need to change this input style here using a condition. First, understand the problem first. So handle change sets the state of the input to event target value. So whatever you type there is gonna become state here. So I need to get the length of this state. So if this dot state dot input, I don't remember. I think length is like this on JavaScript. Don't remember really well. is bigger than anything. Input style dot border equals true. Red. Else input style. Let's see if it works. Doesn't work. So how do I get the length of a string? So if it's bigger than 15 characters, check for this, and if the condition is valid, set the border to 3 pixels. Solid red. So this state input. Maybe I typed the wrong way. That's correct. Yeah, I don't get it. Oh, now it. Oh, it's working. It's working. Nice. It's the border that changed, not the text. That's why I was confused there. So I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick. I think the best way to actually look for what I want is gonna be data structure in React. Conditional rendering is useful, but you may need your components to render an unknown number of elements. Often in reactive programming, a programmer has no way to know what the state of an application is until runtime, because so much depends on the user's interaction with that program. Programmers need to write their code to correctly handle that unknown state ahead of time. Using array.map in React illustrates this concept. For example, you create a simple to-do list app. As a programmer, you have no way of knowing how many items a user might have on their list. You need to set up your component to dynamically render the correct number of list elements long before someone using the program decides that today is laundry day. The code editor has most of the my to-do list components set up. Some of this code should look familiar if you completed the controlled form challenge. You'll notice the text error in the button, along with a couple of methods that track their states, but nothing is rendered to the page yet. So handle submit, handle change, handle submit items array is equal to the state user input dot split. So there is no, so that's probably what I have to do. Use that state equals just to this. There we go. So now I probably have to do something with this. And handle changes, changes the user inputs based on the target value, which is the text input here. So it's probably gonna have user input and to-do list on the state. And I have to change this line here. Okay. Code editor has most to-do components, some of the codes. Inside the constructor, create a this.state object and define two states. User input, such an empty string probably. And to-do list should be initialized as an empty array. Next, delete the comment in the render method. Next to the item variable. In this place, map over the to-do list. So to-do list dot map, I think. But now nothing is showing up. Or maybe I have to put like this. I don't remember really well. Yeah, I know that's the correct way to type it, I guess. That doesn't work. We store in the component's internal state and dynamically render. So maybe it's because I have to do this dot to do list, this dot state dot to do list dot map. Yeah, there we go. Because if I just do to do list, it doesn't have access to the state. So first I need to access this dot state and then to do list. Turn state dynamically render a leaf for each item. Oh, I think I remember this. So here I need to. It's probably gonna be like this here. Yeah. Try entering the string eat code sleep repeat into the text area. Then click the button and see what happens. Note, you may know that all sibling child elements created by a mapping operation like this do need to be supplied with a unique key attribute. Don't worry, this is the topic for the next challenge. Nice. Keys only need to be unique between sibling elements. They don't need to be globally unique in your application. So now I have to change this again. Code editor has an array with some front-end frameworks and a stateless functional component named frameworks. So frameworks needs to map the array to an unordered list. So now it's gonna be /ul. It's probably gonna be E here inside. And now I have to put the key inside of the thing, the UL. This time make sure you give it each Lee a key attribute. Okay, so app callback should return a Lee element. It needs to map the array to an unordered list. Isn't the list unordered? Much like in the last challenge, finish writing the map callback to return a Lee element for each framework. This time make sure to give each Lee a key. So I'm not sure if I should wrap the Lees with, I think it's gonna be like this, or if this is gonna pass. Where there's 6 child Lee elements. So I think I'm gonna do this stuff here, so it's easier to see. But now I'm not sure. Maybe I should put U outside of the map. But it doesn't make sense because I think this part is JavaScript and not JSX. Oh, I forgot the key here. So this should pass another challenges. So it's not passing. Each element should have a unique. What if I do like this? So why they're another list? I don't understand. The code editor, my component's state is initialized with an array of users. Some users are online and some aren't. Filter the array so you see only the users who are online. This use filter. So I have to get this dot state dot users dot filter e dot online. Then I have to render this probably. So not working. Then in the render online variable map over the filtered array. So dot map. I'm gonna turn a Lee element. For each user that contains the text of their username. So I'm not sure if I should put a key here on this. But now it doesn't work. If I do return, maybe it doesn't work. Yeah, I can wrap around curly braces, but it's probably not what I need to do. If I just put E here, but then it returns the letter. That's not what I want. Map over the filter array and return the element for each user that contains the text of their username. Oh, so it's probably e.users. Yeah, e dot. And here I'm not using curly braces. Well, now it probably works. Yeah, because if I don't only return e, then it's probably the users. Which it doesn't make sense to return that. A dictionary, I guess. Not really sure about that, but actually this element should have a key. Yeah, forgot about a key. A dot username. When they react on the server with render to string. So far I have been rendering React components on the client. Normally this is what you will always do. However, there are some use cases where it makes sense to render a React component on the server. Since React is a JavaScript view library and you can run JavaScript on the server with Node, this is possible. In fact, React provides a render to string method you can use for this purpose. There are two key reasons why rendering on the server may be used in a real-world app. First, without doing this, your React apps would consist of a relatively empty HTML file and a large bundle of JavaScript when it's initially loaded to the browser. This may not be ideal for search engines that are trying to index the content of your pages so people can find you. If you render the initial HTML markup on the server and send this to the client, the initial page load contains all of the page's markup, which can be crawled by search engines. Second, this creates a faster initial page load experience because the rendered HTML is smaller than JavaScript code of the entire app. React will still be able to recognize your app and manage it after the initial load. The render to string method is provided on React on server, which is available here as a global object. That's probably React DOM server render to string. The method takes one argument, which is a React element. Use this to render app to string. So it's probably like this. Maybe not. Maybe just that. And it's not rendering, so. Oh, but it's not written either, so. So maybe it is the other way that I did there. There we go. So now it's Redux part. I think I'm over with the React stuff. Yeah. So this was the last one. So I'll probably try to do Redux and React Redux the next time. So I finish this section. And I think I'm done for today. I think I'm probably gonna open this virtual box, set it up, and then search these things here. And then start learning Scrapey. So yeah, see you another time.